Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our second presentation. This presentation is going to be all about birdhouses, bird baths, and bird-friendly backyards. I got it this time.
Yay.
Um, my name is Tyler, and I work for the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. I've been one of Anna's advisors on this project, so it's really great to have all you folks joining. Before we get started with the presentation, if you wouldn't mind answering these questions that are up on the slide in the chat window. So if you scroll down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little chat button. And if you can just type in where you're from, so where you're zooming from today, how many folks are watching with you, and then what was the last really cool bird that you saw. The reason why we asked this, for one, is we want to get to know you all a little bit better and see where you're tuning in from, because we have folks that can join us from anywhere in the world, which is really cool. But also we use these numbers that we have for attendance. This is how we also get funding for the Bird Conservancy. So it's really important that we know that you all are there and that you're listening, so we can get funding, so we can have more presentations like this. So thank you, Randy and Jan, for entering that into the chat. That's cool seeing some Cooper's hawks. Well, red-tailed hawk capturing American coot. That's awesome. Kingfishers. I saw some kingfishers last weekend, which was really cool. Wild turkeys. Nice. Thank you all for entering that into the chat. Again, it helps us with our funding. Oh, an egret. I actually saw a snowy egret this weekend, and it was marked as rare because it's a little early for them to come back. So that's really cool. And if you're just tuning in with us, we're just getting to know you all a little bit better by answering this question. And we'll get started probably in about 1 minute with our presentation. Nice, people are seeing the snowy egrets. I saw one at Prospect Park on Clear Creek this last weekend, which I got really excited because I haven't seen one yet this year. There's a duck in somebody's yard. All right, awesome. Thank you all for filling that out and letting us get to know you a little bit better. Again, my name's Tyler, and I work for the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. And I am here to help present Anna, Avery, and Jenna, who they're going to be presenting on all the bees. So birdhouses, bird baths, and bird-friendly backyards. Thanks, Anna. That's a mouthful for me to say. So thank you all so much for joining us. We will be continuing to use this chat function. So if you have any questions that come up during this presentation, feel free to type those in. We'll have a little session at the end where we can answer some of these questions. And this webinar is also being recorded. So if you miss or you want to go back on any of this really cool information that we're going to present on, you'll be able to do so, and I'll send out that link probably by tomorrow. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to Anna.
Hi everyone, my name is Anna, and with me today is Avery and Jenna. We're all Girl Scouts, and we're the three guest speakers for BCR today. So our topic today is the bees. As Tyler said, it stands for birdhouses, bird baths, and bird-friendly backyard. So it is quite the mouthful. If you weren't with us last week, we're actually not going to start on the content of this presentation just yet. First, we're going to go over some Zoom controls in case you're not familiar with the application, and then we're actually going to take a pre-survey, and I'll explain more about that in a moment. So first, let's go over some Zoom controls in case not everyone's familiar with Zoom. You should have a toolbar that looks something like this on the bottom of your screen. To the left here, you can see this is where the controls for your video camera and your microphone are. When there's a red line through them, that means that they are off. Now, it seems like a lot of people already know how to use the chat, they know where to find it, but if you happen to not know where it is, you just look along your toolbar here. Oh, look, it says chat, and you press that and it will open. It might open on the side here or somewhere else on your screen, sometimes it can kind of be tricky, but I recommend having that open because we are going to be using that today. As Tyler said, you can put in questions. We're also going to be doing a few different activities where we want you guys to throw some guesses in the chat. So please also use the chat for that. If you guys have any issues or problems with Zoom, please let us know and we'll be happy to help in any way we can. Now, I talked about this pre-survey. The link will be in the chat in a moment. Yep, there it is. Jenna just put it in. So part of our presentation today is we have to measure the impact we have on you guys, our audience. So first, we're going to take this pre-survey, see what you guys already know. Then at the end of this presentation, we're actually going to take the same exact survey so we can see how you guys grew, what you did better on, what you learned from today. So we're going to take about 2 minutes to fill out this pre-survey. I recommend exiting out of your full screen on Zoom beforehand and then click the link because sometimes tabs can kind of be tricky. But we're going to take a few minutes to do this. Please let me know if you have any questions and we'll be back in 2 minutes. All right, everyone, I am going to call us all back. If you're still working on that pre-survey, feel free to start wrapping up as I start talking. So again, today's presentation is about the bees. We're going to start off talking about what you should and shouldn't do in your backyard concerning birdhouses and bird baths. Then we're going to go over the several different types of bird feeders. We're going to briefly touch on some bird foods, and then we're going to wrap up discussing what a bird-friendly backyard actually looks like. Now, we are having some technical difficulties today with one of our speakers, so just if we have any difficulties, please just hang tight and thank you for your understanding. So first we're going to start off with birdhouses, and Jenna, please take it away.
Hello, I'm Jenna. So first we're gonna discuss birdhouses. So some of the good things about the birdhouses are unpainted and untreated wood because paint can be toxic to birds. Perches are kind of bad because they aid the predators hunting. Roughed or grooved interior walls to help the fledglings climb out of their nest are very useful. And whether if it's rough or grooved, it depends on the species. Sloped roof with the overhang will help protect the birds inside from any weather. And ventilation drainage holes will be very nice because then they can live in poop, and I don't think many people would like that. So to recap, the bad are perches, the house being painted or decorative, and no drainage holes.
All right, so now we're gonna do a really fast activity here. So just think about the stuff that Jenna just mentioned. and then look at these examples of birdhouses. Several of these are actually bad examples of birdhouses. So you can just kind of think your answers in your head, or you can put them in the chat, or you can just write them down. So it's totally up to you what you want to do. And then we will go over that in just 1 second. So a lot of people are saying that A and E are the ones that are right, and some people are saying only A. So the ones that are correct are A and E. However, A is actually not as correct as E because A doesn't have any drainage holes or ventilation holes. E is actually okay. You might be thinking that it's not right because the little baby birds can see you and they might be freaked out or scared. And actually those often come with like a screen or a curtain or something that you can just put in front of that and make it so that the birds aren't going to be too scared away by you. As far as the rest of the ones go, you can see that B, C, D, and F are incorrect. B has a really, really big entrance hole and it's a little bit painted. But the main thing we're looking at here is that it has a huge entrance hole and that's going to let a bunch of weather in. It's going to be cold and windy and wet, and that's just not a good living environment. C, as you can see, is painted. So is F. All of those are painted and they're lovely, but we got to remember that the birdhouses are for the birds and not for us. So we don't want them painted. We don't want them super decorative. We just want them to be functional and to be good homes for the birds. D looks pretty good, aside from the fact that it has perches and no ventilation holes. So the perches are bad. Perches help the predators get into the birdhouses, so that's no good. We don't want perches on birdhouses. So go ahead and take it away, Anna. We're going to talk about where you put birdhouses.
So yeah, it's not only important to have a good birdhouse, it's also important that you put your birdhouse in the right place. So where is that right place? The best place for your birdhouse is on a freestanding pole or actually mounted on the side of a house. And you can see the photo on our left here. That's an example of a birdhouse that's on a freestanding pole. Now you can put your birdhouse mounted on a tree trunk. However, that's not always the most ideal spot. Lots of predators like squirrels, cats, raccoons, snakes, they can easily climb that tree trunk and they'll have easy access to whatever birdhouse you put on a tree trunk. So ideally, you actually want to do the freestanding pole or mounted on the side of a house because predators can't it's not as easy for the predators to get to the birdhouse that way. So we recommend these two options actually over mounting your birdhouse on a tree trunk. You also want to put your birdhouse that's somewhere protected. If you have a seasonal wind in your area, you want to make sure that the entrance hole doesn't face into the wind. We want it to face another direction. Now, if you're joining us from a hot climate today, you want to put your birdhouse in a shaded area so the birdhouse won't get as hot. And if you're joining us from a wet climate today, you want to put your birdhouse in a sheltered area so there's more natural protection from the elements. Now let's talk about this last bullet point. You might think, hey, I have a birdhouse and I have a bird feeder, so let's put them right next to each other because then mama bird will have an easy time getting food. She'll be more successful in raising her young. Then there'll be more birds in the world and yay, everyone's happy, right? Well, not exactly, because the thing is, birds are like you. They like privacy. And if you put your birdhouse right next to a bird feeder, they might not actually nest there because there's too much bird activity going on around it. So you can have a birdhouse and a bird feeder in your backyard, but you want to make sure that they're in different areas so those birds have enough privacy.
So Next, we are going to talk about predation. Predation is natural, but it is unnatural when we make it easy for predators to get the birds. So here are a few predator guards to help prevent birds from being an easy meal. We have the stovepipe baffle, which is a long cylinder. This guard is one of the most effective ones. We have the Noel predator guard, which is like a mesh box. We have a metal collar, which is basically a circular structure. Predator guards aren't 100% predator proof, but they will definitely help.
All right, so next we're going to discuss bird baths. So when you make a bird bath, the way you want to think of it is like a puddle, because if birds didn't use bird baths, they would be using puddles instead, because this is basically the naturally occurring version of a bird bath. So puddles are, you want to have them about 1/2 inch to 1 inch deep, just because if it's too deep, then the birds probably aren't going to use it. It's not as good in general. And then you want an area where the birds won't get wet. You don't want a straight drop off. You want like kind of a border around the edge of the bird bath so that they'll have somewhere to stand, because birds don't always want to bathe in the water. Sometimes they just want to pop over for a drink and they don't really want to get wet. And you don't want it really close or really far away from shelter. You just want it in kind of a medium spot. We usually say that 10 feet is pretty good. And then you want it in a shady spot. The reason why you don't want it too close or too far away from shelter is because you don't want it to make it super easy for predators to sneak up on them. And then, so just the opposite of that, the bad things are deeper than 2 inches. You don't want a straight drop off, and you don't want it glazed. Glaze is not really a natural thing that happens in puddles. So based on our rule of puddles, that's not something that we really want, because the birds have like talons, right? And when they step on glaze, it's going to be really, really slippery. So we don't want glaze because it'll be really hard for them to use the bird bath. So unglazed is better.
Now we're going to do that same little activity we did a few moments ago, but now we're going to do it with bird baths. So again, our question is, out of these, which do you think are the most beneficial for birds? So go ahead, just throw some answers in the chat. If you aren't sure, remember all of those good qualities that Avery just went over. You'll actually remember this content more if you guess and you're wrong. So don't feel shy. Let's get some answers in the chat. I'm going to keep stalling as we wait for some answers. Oh, here's some. Oh, it looks like we're already at some disagreement. It looks like almost everyone has said B. We have a lot of votes for F. And then it looks like we're kind of halfways on C and D. So thank you guys for participating so much. It's a lot more fun when we get to see if you're right or wrong, excuse me. So let's see what options are actually correct. So on this side here, we have the incorrect answers. The incorrect answers are B, E, and C. And then the correct answers are A, D, and F. And just like Avery did last time, I'm going to go through one of these each at a time so we know why they're wrong. Now, B looks like a pretty good bird bath, right? It's not that deep. It has a rim where a bird can sit and not get wet. Doesn't have a straight drop off. It looks like a pretty good bird bath, right? However, we were trying to trick you because B is a glazed bird bath. I'm sorry if you're annoyed, but it is glazed, so we don't want to use it. Remember, like Avery just said, glaze is really slippery for birds. And if I'm a bird and I decide to use this bird bath and I end up slipping into the water and getting all wet when I don't want to, quite frankly, I might not come back. So we want to avoid glazing our bird baths. Now, C is also a wrong answer because of 2 reasons. First off, it's too deep. And secondly, it has a straight drop off. Remember, a straight drop off is something that we don't want. What we want instead is a sloping descent. So with B, it look kind of B, option B, it looks like a dinner plate, right? It, and C, it looks like a bowl. We want our bird baths to look like plates or puddles where they're not that deep. They don't have a straight drop off. They have a sloping descent instead. Now, E is also incorrect. It's too deep. The descent is pretty steep. We don't want it to be that steep, and it's very decorative. Bird baths are the same as birdhouses. We want them to be functional over, hey, yeah, this looks really pretty in my yard, because decorative things aren't always the best for birds. Option E also looks like it might have some type of finish on it. It looks a little reflective. I'm not sure if it is glaze, but that finish also might be slippery. We want to avoid finishes. Birds also prefer natural looking bird baths. So E is just way too much decorations and all of that. Now let's discuss our correct ones. So A is the picture of a perfect bird bath in many ways. If you were to remember one bird bath from today, I recommend remembering bird bath A. It has a lot of our good characteristics, right? Sloping descent. It's not too deep. And there's multiple areas where a bird can sit and not get wet. The way I think about it with our bird baths, we want to make sure that birds can take a sip without taking a dip. They shouldn't have to get wet to get to that water. Now, with A, you'll also notice that there's some rocks in the middle. You don't have to put rocks in the middle of your bird bath, but it is something that you can do. Some people like to do it because it provides more room for the birds to preen themselves. So that's another option that you can do with your bird bath. Now let's talk about F. And hopefully you got F, because I mean there is a bird in it, so we're probably doing something right, right? F has a lot of the same good characteristics, but what I really want to point out is how deep it is. You'll notice that the water doesn't come farther than the robin's legs. And I mean, the robin's kind of crouched down, so perhaps this actually isn't the best picture, but the water isn't that deep. The interesting thing is birds can actually drown in bird baths. That might seem strange for you, and probably for two reasons. A, birds can fly, and B, some of our waterfowl are designed to swim. They like being in the water. Well, birds are songbirds, and all of the birds that are in your backyard, these birds, they actually can drown. And unfortunately, I've personally experienced this. My family has pet finches. They're not from North America, but they're closely related to the finches we have, and they're about the same size. And a few years ago, we had a tub of water in our bird cage, and a bird got in there and it was too deep and they ended up drowning. It was really sad. So remember, you don't want your bird bath to be too deep, because birds actually can drown. Now, D looks very different from the rest of our bird baths, but that's not a bad thing. It's just an example of a homemade bird bath. Bird baths can be made out of just about anything. People have made a bird bath out of like sleds and pots and trays and a whole array of things. So you just need to make sure that the bird baths are following the good characteristics we went over. You'll also notice with option D that there's some spraying water going on. You don't have to have spraying or dripping water in your bird bath, but something that birds are actually partial to, and it will attract them more. Now, I'm pretty sure that we had some people say option D was correct, but not everyone did. And maybe you thought it was incorrect because of this tree, right? We have this tree right next to option D, and a predator could easily use this tree to snatch an unsuspecting bird. So with option D, the bird bath itself is good, but the location isn't. So perhaps that's why some of you thought it wasn't a good option. We actually want this bird bath to be moved away from the tree so predators can't use it to sneak up on birds. And I know that we have some chats out here. I don't see any questions, so we are going to, something actually I do want to touch on is someone said, I skipped A because I thought it was too low and easier for a cat to attack. And I think someone also agrees with them. So actually, generally, we actually want our bird baths to be close to the ground or on the ground. And that might seem a little weird to you because like this person said, like, hey, a cat could get to them and like that's bad. Well, puddles, remember, we want our bird baths to mimic puddles, and puddles are on the ground. And it's actually not bad for birds to be on the ground. The issue is when there's something like a tree or a bush where the cat or whatever predator can hide from the bird and get them really easy. So it's actually okay if we put our bird baths on the ground. It's bad when there's some type of tree or other shelter where the cat is able to sneak up on the birds easier. And I didn't see any more questions. If you come up with any more, well, we can answer them at the end, but for now, we're going to move on.
So we have bird baths, and how do we keep it clean? The most important part of having a bird bath is keeping it clean. So we shall go over that. We should change the water about every 1 to 2 days. Mosquitoes like to breed in still water, and both humans and birds can get West Nile virus. So protect yourself and birds by changing that water daily. Algae can grow in the bird bath, and algae can be toxic to birds. If algae develops in your bird bath, clean it with hot water and a stiff brush. Some of the things that can help prevent mosquitoes and algae is moving water. It really helps with that.
While we're on the subject of maintaining bird baths, we're going to talk about the fact that you can actually have a bird bath in winter. So there's a couple different ways to do this. You can set out a fresh bowl of water every day, and then once it freezes, bring it inside. Or you can get a bird bath with a heater. These are a little bit less common, and they're also going to be more of an investment. But if you really want to make sure that you have some nice, slightly warm water for your birds to drink, you can go ahead and invest in this. And also note that those bird baths with heaters will not work in freezing temperatures. So just don't completely rely on it. And it's not always possible to provide winter bird baths, but honestly, don't stress out that much about it, because when there aren't puddles available and when there aren't bird baths available, birds will use icicles, which there are plenty of in winter. So don't stress out about it too much. Don't do anything drastic like put antifreeze in the bird bath water. That is not good for the birds. Don't do that. So yeah, don't worry about it too much. It'll all work out.
Now we're going to transition and talk about bird feeders. But before I really get into bird feeders, let's talk about a common misconception. People think that bird feeders will prevent birds from migrating, and that's not true. Birds depend on their instincts, their internal compass, and the length of the day to tell when it's time to migrate. And that decision isn't based upon whether there's food or not. So you can feel safe about providing birds with food. You're not interfering with migration or anything. It's all good. That's just a quick misconception that we wanted to clear. Now I'm going to go over one of these each at one at a time. If you're here today, you probably like birds. And if you like birds, you probably actually already have a bird feeder. So our point with this slide today is actually to point out the many different types of bird feeders in case you aren't familiar with all of them. So I'm going to get started with this tray feeder on the left here. So a tray feeder is exactly how it sounds. It's a tray full of seed. A big negative about the tray feeder, however, is it's very prone to bacteria. If it rains, all of that seed is going to get wet. And as birds are feeding, they're hopping around in the seed and they're doing their business anywhere they like. So the seed of tray feeders, it can get really dirty really quickly. So if you have a tray feeder, you're actually supposed to clean it every day. It's a little high maintenance, so it can be really cool to see, the birds hopping around. And this feeder is really good for birds who eat from the ground, like your juncos and doves. But if you but you need to make sure if you get this feeder that you're going to clean it every day. Now the house feeder on the bottom there, it also looks like how it sounds. It's shaped in a little house. Um, the house feeder is a lot better at protecting the seed from the weather than the tray feeder. It has that enclosure, right? And the seed can stay nice and dry inside. If you aren't familiar with the anatomy of a house feeder, you'll see that right here, there's a hinge on the top, and you actually just lift up this part of the roof right here. It's actually a lid, and that's how you get the seed in the bird bath. And then to feed from it, there's actually two troughs right here, and it's where the male cardinal is right here, and birds are able to easily feed from there. So kind of talking about being cleanly, the house feeder can be a better option, and it also doesn't need to be cleaned as much. So that's a benefit for some people. Now I'm going to talk about the tube feeder, which is right here. Now the tube feeder, it also looks exactly as it sounds. It is a tube. Tube feeders come in a variety of sizes. This tube feeder is actually fairly large. The tube feeder is also better at protecting against bacteria. The birds can't, they're not actually in the seed. There's a lid to keep the rain or snow out. So they also don't have to be cleaned as often. Now, another perk about the tube feeder is it only feeds smaller birds. Uh, some of the bigger birds you have in your yard, like starlings and blackbirds and jays, sometimes people refer to them as bully birds because they kind of just take over, eat all the seed, and then they leave. However, with these bully birds, they can't feed from a tube feeder because the feeding ports are too small. So if you only want to feed smaller birds, a tube feeder is a good option. Now, the three bird feeders I've gone over so far, the tube, tray, and house feeders, these feeders are all for some type of seed mix. The next three feeders I'm going to go through, these are all for certain types of bird food. So let's start with thistle sock on the right there. The thistle sock, it also looks like what it sounds like. It's this mesh fabric bag, and the birds can land anywhere on it. I've actually seen birds land on it upside down before and feed up while they're hanging upside down. So they're a little bit different. To me, they're a little bit cooler because they're not really your average bird feeder when you think of like the traditional bird feeder. Now, thistle socks, they're specifically designed for Niger seed. Niger seed is kind of like sunflower seeds. That's how you can think about it. Now, something that's a little bad or a con about thistle socks is they're a little messy. If you get a thistle sock, you might notice that there is a pile of Niger seed on the ground. And you might think, oh, my thistle sock, it's leaking or something to that extent. Something's not right. The birds are wasting food. But that's actually supposed to happen because Niger seeds, I said they look like sunflower seeds, but they also have the anatomy of sunflower seeds where there's a shell that you don't eat, then there's an intermediate part that you do eat. So all of those black seeds that you're seeing on the ground under your thistle sock feeder, that's actually supposed to happen. Those are the shells, the part the birds don't eat on the ground there. However, sometimes that can be a problem because all of the shells are accumulating. So what you can do is you can rake the shells away, disperse them out, or you can periodically move your thistle sock feeder around your yard so that waste doesn't build up. Now, I'm not going to say too much about the hummingbird feeder. I think as far as hummingbird feeders, uh, I think as far as bird feeders go, the hummingbird feeder is the most iconic one, but there is something really important that I want to point out. You'll notice that the hummingbird feeder itself is very colorful. It's red and yellow, bright, attracting colors, right? But the actual substance inside the hummingbird feeder, the nectar, the sugar water, whatever it is, it's actually clear. There's this misconception that you need to dye sugar water red to attract hummingbirds, and that's false. Nectar in real life is actually clear, so hummingbirds will still come and eat from your bird feeder if the liquid is clear, and we think red dye actually may harm hummingbirds. So whatever you're putting in your hummingbird feeder, you don't want it to be dyed basically. You don't want to use red dye. Now, the last feeder I'm going to go over today is the suet feeder. It's this metal, great boxy looking thing, and it holds blocks of suet. If you don't know what suet is, we're actually going to go over that a little bit later. Now, suet is loved by chickadees and nuthatches and woodpeckers. But you know who also loves suet is magpies and European starlings, which are invasive, and blackbirds. And I know from experience that once a magpie sits down and starts eating your suet, they might eat the whole block of suet in one sitting. And suet is not the most inexpensive thing in the world. So, for a lot of people, they don't want that to happen. However, there's a special suet feeder where you can make it where only the smaller birds, those woodpeckers, nuthatches, you can make it where only they can feed. And I'm going to describe it right now. So, there, our suet feeder on the slide, it's vertical. The suet feeder that I'm talking about now, it actually lays horizontally like this. And not only does it lay horizontally, there's a sheet of metal that comes up that is on the top. So suet is only available on the bottom, and birds they have to hang upside down basically to get to that suet. All of your nuthatches and your chickadees and your woodpeckers, the birds you want to attract, they're great at hanging upside down while eating. But you know who's not? Your starlings, your blackbirds, and your magpies. So if you have a problem with starlings or magpies eating all of your suet, you can get that different suet feeder where a bird can only feed from the bottom and you won't have a problem anymore. So these are some different bird feeders that are out there in the world. I recommend, if you're looking for a bird feeder, I might try something funky because sometimes you get, more funky birds. Or I just really like the thistle sock feeder. In all honesty, it's really fun, and the suet feeder. But I digress. So now that we know about our different types of bird feeders, now we're going to go over some associated details about those bird feeders. The first thing is cleaning. So the general rule of thumb is you want to clean your bird bath every 1 to 2, not bird bath, your bird feeder every 1 to 2 weeks. Now, if your bird feeder isn't being used that much, you're okay with cleaning it at least every 2 weeks. However, if your bird feeder is being used very heavily, like you see a lot of bird activity, there's a high amount of bird droppings, you actually want to clean your bird feeder at least at least once per week. So when you want to clean your bird feeder is actually a little bit of a judgment call, but use that rule of thumb to guide you. Now, with hummingbird feeders and tray feeders, it's a little bit different. We just went over that tray feeders, they're very prone to bacteria, right? And because of that, we want to clean them every 1 to 2 days. We also want to clean hummingbird feeders that often because the sugar water, the nectar, or whatever you have in your hummingbird feeder, it spoils really fast. So cleaning your feeder that often makes sure that you aren't giving hummingbirds any spoiled food. However, the most important part of cleaning your bird bath, not bird bath, I'm sorry, I keep saying that. Your bird feeder is actually getting one that's easy to clean. Now, if you get a bird bath, not a bird bath, again, I'm saying it over and over again. I don't know what's up with me. If you get a bird feeder that's hard to clean, you might not clean it as much as you should. So save yourself the hassle and just get a bird feeder that's easy to clean so it gets cleaned as much as it should. Now let's talk about placement from windows. Your bird feeder should be closer than 3 feet or farther than 10 feet from a window. Now, this might seem to go against common sense. You might be thinking, but Anna, you just told us last week that windows are really harmful for birds. A lot of birds die because they hit windows. And why are you telling us to put our bird feeder right next to our window? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Well, there actually is some reasoning behind this. And the reasoning is let's say you do have your bird feeder closer than 3 feet to a window. And I'm a bird who's on that bird feeder. And after I'm done eating, I decide, hey, that window, maybe I see like a bush. There's a reflection of a bush or something. I'm like, hey, that looks like a pretty cool bush. I want to go over there and see what's up. And I decide to fly into that window. Well, since the bird feeder is so close to the window, I don't have a lot of time to accelerate. So I'm not going to hit the window that hard and I'm going to be fine. So that's why you can actually put your bird feeder closer than 3 feet. However, on that same note, you do not want to put your bird feeder something like 7 feet away from the window because 7 feet gives me as a bird enough time to accelerate that if I do hit that window, it might be fatal. Now, as far as shelter goes, it's kind of the same thing with our bird baths. We want shelter to be about 10 feet away. And that's because we want our bird feeder birds, they should have cover near them to hide from a predator. But we also don't want to provide a place for a predator to hide from the bird feeder birds. So 10 feet is that happy medium.
So now we are going to talk about bird foods. Different types of bird foods are going to attract different types of species, like peanuts. One thing that you should know, they must stay dry. When they are wet, they can release toxins. And peanuts can be unshelled or shelled. We have the suet that Anna was talking about earlier, which is basically animal fat. It has a lot of nutrients, and the best time to put it out is during the winter because they need that extra fat. Oranges can be also pretty good for birds. They are a favorite of, so yeah. Peanut butter is something that birds really like, and a really good source of fat, just like the suet. Put it out in cool or colder weather so peanut butter doesn't turn rancid. It's false that birds can choke on peanut butter. The dark seed on the slide is the Niger seed that Anna was also talking about earlier. This is the type of seed that usually goes into the thistlestalk feeders. When we have your generic mixed seeds. It attracts many different birds, and it all depends on what it consists of. We aren't going to talk to you about the different types of seed today, but there are online resources that you can look into.
So I know Jenna was breaking up. Just to clarify again, with this photo, she was pointing out the peanut butter that's actually on the pine cone. Let us know if you guys have any more questions about this slide. We're gonna go ahead and move on. So now that we have talked about all of the different elements to make a bird-friendly backyard, what does a bird-friendly backyard actually look like? Well, there's 4 components. The first one is food, which we can provide through our bird feeders. Then we also have water, which we can provide through our bird baths. And we also want to provide nesting sites, which we do through our birdhouses. So those are 3 of the 4 components. However, there is a 4th component that we have not gone over today, but it's very important. It might actually be the most important one. So if you guys are willing, I'd like you guys to throw some guesses in the chat. What do we think this 4th component is? And no, it's not cover. If you need, if you're not quite sure, I recommend looking at these photos. What do we think this 4th component is? Someone said water. I did mention that. I'm not looking for that. So we already have food, water, and nesting sites. So what is this 4th one? Again, let's look at these images. The answer is right in front of you. I'm also not looking for cover either. I'm sorry, you guys are trying really hard, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something else. Oh, someone got it. Plants. I'm looking for plants. Yes, thank you guys so much. Also, thank you to you guys who started the conversation, even though you weren't right. Yes, we want plants. Plants are really important to birds because they provide a ton of different resources. Some plants actually provide water to birds. Plants can provide natural nesting sites. They can provide nesting materials, and they can also provide cover from predators. Some plants actually also provide their own food. I know that Avery and we both have sunflowers in our yards. And if you don't know, goldfinches, which is actually this bird right here, they love sunflower seeds. They will actually land on the heads of the sunflowers, and they will pick the sunflower heads clean until there's no seeds left. They love them. Anyway, I digress again, but the plants, they're also really important for birds. Birds can't exist without plants. The 2 are intertwined. Now that's actually all I'm going to say about plants, because plants is actually the topic of our next presentation next week. So if you want to learn more about the bird-plant relationship, I suggest tuning in next week. But anyway, right, we have these 4 components now, right? We have our food, our water, our plants, and our nesting sites. So to have a bird-friendly backyard, you want to provide these components. You don't have to provide all of the 4 components, but the more you have, the better. And yes, as someone said in the chat, we want to plant native plants. Actually, if a plant isn't native to our area, you probably don't want to plant it, because that bird-plant relationship, the plants in that relationship are native plants. So yes, planting native is also very important.
All right, and that actually wraps up our presentation for the day. So what we're gonna do now is just briefly go over what we learned, and then we're gonna do a post survey and do a brief Q&A. So just for a summary, remember that both birdhouses and bird baths should be functional instead of decorative. They are both for the birds and not for you. So just keep that in mind when you're either building them or just buying them, putting them in your backyard. Just as a reminder, birdhouses should be unpainted with a steep roof and no perch. either on a pole or mounted on the side of a house. Bird baths should be shallow with a place where they don't have to get wet, and about 10 feet away from shelter. Also remember to clean your birdhouse after each use. Bird baths should be cleaned every 1 to 2 days. And remember that the closer than 3 feet or farther than 10 feet rule for bird feeders. And then as we went over, there are many bird feeder and bird food options. If you want to attract different birds to your yard, you can get a lot of variety with the different options. So just keep all that in mind. And now we're gonna move on to the next bit of our conclusion. So we've got this post survey. Go ahead and do that really quick. Jenna just put it in the chat, and then we'll do a brief Q&A. When you guys are finished with the post survey, you can go ahead and type any questions that you have into the chat. And Anna will continue. Take it from there.
Yeah, so as Avery said, the three of us were actually just going to sit here and wait for you guys to put questions in the chat. I know we already had some as we went along, but if you have any other questions, please send them our way and we'll answer them as best as we can.
And we did have a couple folks arrive a little late. And if you did arrive late, don't worry, this is being recorded. And I will send out the YouTube link tomorrow morning, so you'll be able to go back on all this great information that these ladies have provided us. Ooh, the squirrel question.
Yes, so Nancy asked, squirrels use our bird bath too. Is that a problem concerning germs? Not that I know of. Maybe Tyler actually knows more about this than me, but squirrels, they're just an animal like birds. And I mean, every bird that comes along is going to have germs, right? So not squirrels specifically, I know are a problem, but still we want to clean our bird bath every day because anyone who's using that bird bath is bringing in germs. And so, yeah, Tyler, do you have anything to add on to that?
Not much. I mean, squirrels are more of just an annoyance to us. They eat our bird food. They use the bird baths and everything. But no, I mean, the big thing that's actually happening now is with bird feeders, there is a salmonella outbreak out in like Oregon and California. So really being vigilant about cleaning your bird feeders, especially now, because we don't want that salmonella outbreak to come to our birds out here in Colorado. And that's just kind of started happening, and there's more articles on that if you want to look it up.
All right, then someone asked, sorry, I'm behind on the questions. So someone asked, will this be for a GS project or a gold award? So this presentation is actually part of my gold award. If you guys don't know what a gold award is, it's basically the Girl Scout version of the Eagle Award. It's pretty prestigious. It's a hard project, but so this is a gold award. I hope that answers your question. And you can ask us more questions on that if you want to. And then someone else asked, is there a ratio of amount of space to the number of bird feeders you should have? I don't know of a numeric rule of thumb, but just use common sense, right? We don't want to have, our all of our bird feeders lined up in a row. We'd rather have them evenly spaced out. So then the birds are evenly spaced out. They feel like they have enough room and all of those bird feeders are being used. Because the other thing is, if you put all of your bird feeders together, not all of them might be used. Maybe for some reason the birds are just using one of them. So I don't have a specific numeric value for you. Just use common sense and make sure that they're spread out. And yes, someone said a great way to add moving water is to have a jug with a pinhole hanging above and drip down. Yes, I've actually seen people do this. Is exactly as described. And remember, dripping water, birds are partial to it. It attracts them. So if you want to attract more birds, that's something that you can also do, and that's also something homemade. It's inexpensive, so you could probably do that if you want to. And someone also pointed out that hummingbird feeders need to be cleaned more often when the weather is warm. Yes, because when your nectar or your sugar water or whatever is in your hummingbird feeder, it will spoil more quickly when it is hot out. And actually, sometimes with hummingbird feeders, the air pressure will like expand, and your hummingbird feeder will start cracking or leaking or something like that. So yeah, you want to. Good point. Thank you. We want to clean our hummingbird feeders more often. Oh, and someone said, so it's more difficult, apparently. Thank you for contributing, Nicole. It's more difficult for squirrels to transmit diseases to birds since they are different types of animals. And someone asked, is so I think your question is there a time of year we shouldn't use suet? So with suet, remember suet is basically animal fat. And I don't know of a specific season that you don't want to use it necessarily. Maybe Tyler can jump in again here for me. But when it is really hot out, though, the suet might start melting. It might turn a little rancid. So during those really hot days, you probably shouldn't have suet out because it's not going to really do the birds any good.
That was great. You had it, Anna. You
All
had
right.
my input. And then I think kind of the last question that came up was, do we want to have different sized birdhouses to attract different sized birds?
Yeah, so so you're correct when you say not every bird can use the same birdhouse, right? It depends on the size. So yeah, if you want to like attract bluebirds, I think there's actually specific measurements for a bluebird box, but the birdhouse you provide for like a nuthatch or something isn't the same birdhouse you provide for like a downy woodpecker. And actually, one of the resources we're going to give you guys, it's a good little infographic on all of the good things to have of your birdhouse. That infographic, it actually has what birds can use what sized entrance holes. So for example, if you don't want European starlings nesting in your bird box, there's a certain diameter you have to make the hole smaller by, and they won't be able to fit in and they won't be able to use it. But yes, not every birdhouse is for every bird. It does depend on the size.
Awesome. So it looks like we're just kind of getting up on the hour. So I do want to just say thank you so much to Anna and Jenna and Avery. That was a super informative, really great presentation that we had. And again, that was their second one. So I will send out the link to the recording of the first one if you missed it. Bird Conservancy, we're also doing a lot of programming right now. We're doing in-person bird walks out at Bar Lake on Mondays and Saturdays. We're also doing a webinar tomorrow with our biologist and bander Meredith. She's going to be presenting all about spring migration, and registration does end tonight. So I think I have the link. I'll enter that into the chat real quick. if you would like to register for that one. Meredith is a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure she'll get us all really, really excited about spring migration. We will be back next week with Anna and Jenna and Avery to present all about native plants and why we should plant native plants versus non-native. So that's going to be another great one as spring is upon us and the weather is warming. I know I spent a lot of time in my backyard getting it ready for spring this past weekend. So thank you all so much for attending. Please attend again next week. And if you want to check out any of the other Bird Conservancy recordings, they're on our YouTube channel. And if you want to do a program with us in the future, like our bird camps, which Anna was a part of, that's going on this summer as well. And you can find all that information on our website. So I hope you all have a lovely evening, and we'll see you back next. Yeah, bird camp is great. If you have any siblings out there that need to go to bird camp, we are filling up pretty quickly. So check that out on our website. So have a great evening, everyone. Again, thank you, Anna, Jenna, and Avery. Great presentation as always. And we'll see you all hopefully next week.